If you have any queries, please post it on WhatsApp group, because I will be actively seeing it. Chat, please do not use it. So let us start with tuple. Square box, sorry, this is a symbol for square brackets is a symbol for list, and angular bracket is a symbol for tuple. Let us say tup is our tuple, and we are writing it as a 1 comma 2 comma 3. So basically it's a tuple. If we want to print it, we can simply print tup. And if I want to create a list, let us say lst is equal to 1 comma 2 comma 3, and I'm printing a list. So you can observe that there is the only difference that with tuple there is opening and closing angular bracket, and for list there is opening and closing square brackets. But there is a major difference, and that difference is list is mutable. So what do you mean by list is mutable? Let us say I want to change the element at location say 2 is equal to 10. So can I change it? Yes, I can change it. So we can observe earlier it was 3 and now it is 10. But if I want to change the element in a tuple at location 2 and print, it is not possible. So what it says, tuple object does not support item assignment. So we cannot do it. If you want to access the element, yes, we can access the element. So there is no issue. So the major difference between tuple and list is tuple is mutable. List is mutable, whereas tuple is immutable. Means we cannot change the contents of tuple. Other than that, all possible operations that you can perform on list, you can perform it on tuple also. For example, if you want to iterate through the elements of tuple, then I can say for, let's say, for element in tuple, print ln. So can we do it? Yes. If we want to identify the length of tuple, yes, we can do it. So there are no problems. Things are easy. Then there are operations like in keyword is there, not in keyword is there. For example, 1 in TUP. Is 1 present in a TUP? Yes, true. 10 in TUP. Is 10 present in tuple? No. Similarly, 10 not in TUP. 10 is not present in tuple. Oh, sorry, I want to run it. So 10 not in TUP, true, because value 10 is not in tuple. So basically tuple and list both are same. Then when tuple is used and when list is used, suppose you have some values and you are passing it to another function. But is it necessary that that function is written by you? It is not necessary. You are writing one part of function and another function is written by your friend. And what you want? The one who is receiving the value should not be able to update the value. Then how can you pass the value? You can pass the value in the form of tuple. And since it is passed in the form of tuple, the receiving function cannot modify the value. So basically, tuple is used in front of instead of list only when you want that receiving code should not be able to modify the value. So you are enforcing those things. I hope the concept related to tuple is clear. Atharva, any other doubt? Okay, Atharva. If you have any other particular doubt, please tell me. So now we'll move to Chauhan. So he had a doubt in lambda function, and there are other people also who said, okay, there is a doubt in lambda function. So basically, lambda functions are anonymous functions. So what do you mean by anonymous functions? There is no name. But yes, then how you call it? If there is no function name, can you call it? Yes, we can call it. So anonymous function means there is no particular name, like you are writing def keyword then function name, and you are passing arguments explicitly and you are calling it, then those are formal functions. But when you are not writing such things like this, then such functions are called as lambda functions. Again, for lambda functions, students might argue that yes sir, we can give name to lambda functions, but again, that is optional. You can write lambda functions without name also, and you can create lambda functions with name also. That's why in theory it is a anonymous function. In practical, yes, you can say some, it can be anonymous, it cannot be anonymous, depending on whether you are assigning a name to the lambda function or not. For example, let us say we have a list over here, 1 comma 2 comma 3 comma 4, and now what we want to do, we want to increase the value of every element in the list by 1. So क्या करना पड़ेगा, definitely we need to write some function, or we need to write a for loop like that, no? So what we can do is something like this, no? For x in LST, oh sorry, for x in ls, something is wrong, no, it's a big blunder. So I can simply print x plus 5. Yes, so you can do that. If you want another list, then what you can write, lst underscore 1 is equal to blank list, and then you can simply write something like this, lst underscore 1 dot append. So you are copying the updated value in lst1 list, and then you are printing lst underscore 1. So this is how you can do it, or you can use lambda function. So how you are using lambda function? So let us say we are writing a lambda function something like this. So increase is equal to lambda. So now we are giving a particular name, that is increase, to a lambda function x. When I say x, it means x is a input to a lambda function. X is a input to a lambda function, colon. So whatever after colon is a body of a lambda function. Before colon is a argument to our lambda function, and after colon is a body of our lambda function. So that is increment the value of x by 1, that is x plus 1. So this x plus 1 is a return value by lambda function. So there is no need to use return keyword or something like that. And then we can simply say, let me copy paste the code. So this is our list, and now what we want to do, we want to call this thing. So how we can call this thing? So we can use a map function. So simple thing is, it's like I can call a increase by passing 6, receiving the result in some variable, let us say y, and then print that variable. So 6 is incremented by 5, that is 6 plus 5, 11. So this is how we can call the lambda function. But let us say I want to increase the value of every element in lambda function. Then, sorry, every element in a list. Then I need to pass every element of list one by one to lambda function. Means first pass 1 as a x to lambda function, then pass 2 as a x to lambda function, pass 3 as an argument to lambda function, pass 4 as an argument to lambda function, and so on. So either you can do it implicitly or we can do it explicitly. So doing explicitly means what? Calling, using a for loop and passing it one by one, something like this. For example, for lm in lst, and I am saying let us say y is equal to increase lm and print y. So here every time we are increase function is getting called, we are passing element to lambda function, receiving the value, and then printing it. So this is called as explicitly passing the value from a list to lambda function. But when we are doing things explicitly, it increases the code length. So definitely we don't want that. So there is a map function. There is a map function. So what map function does, it takes two inputs. One is a lambda function and second is a list. So what this map function will do, it will receive first argument of a list, that is 1, will pass it as input to increase function. Then it will take second argument 2, it will pass as a input to increase function. Then it will take third argument, pass it as an input to increase function, then fourth, and so on. And let us say this is our result, and we want to print the result. So what it has returned? It has returned some object, and yes, we can always typecast this object. So let us see, can we typecast it to list using list keyword? Yes, we can typecast it to list. So now the return value is in the form of list. So can we typecast it to tuple? Yes, we can typecast it to tuple also. So the output of this map function is an object, and then we can typecast it to anything that we want. Let us say what I'm doing. Okay, let me first copy paste the code. Before that, is there any doubt till this point? Anyone? If you have any doubt, please post it on a group. Okay, I hope there is no doubt. So let us say I don't want to use lambda something like here. Code. So what I'm doing is, can I do something like this? Cut and paste. Yes, I can do. So now this is a complete and pure anonymous function. There is no name assigned. There is no name assigned to it. And even and now this is a shortcut. This is a short code. Instead of tuple, I can typecast it to list also. I can even reduce the length of code by doing something like this. That is, I'm not explicitly mentioning the list. I'm running it. And we can even short down the code to something like this. I'm printing it here only, and I'm using list function here. So the entire thing is done in one line. Okay, sir, can you show more complex example of a lambda function? Yes, we can go for more complex example of a lambda function, but the problem is I'm not able to read your names. All these are special symbols only. Tilde, exclamatory mark, greater than, at the rate, double exclamatory marks, and so on. Can you please post your name so that I can talk with you? Okay, Palav. Palav, am I right? Okay, Palav. Yes, we can go with a more complex example of lambda functions. See, is it okay if we'll go in next session when we can deal with files and all, and we'll prepare a proper example in that case. Palav? Okay. So I'm noting it down, Palav. Complex example of lambda function. Yes, it can be accommodated. Anyone else? Any particular suggestion or a doubt or a request? No? Okay, good. So this was then Chauhan's, like sorting using lambda function. So he had some doubt in sorting using lambda function. Let us say, so there are certain names. Names are like say Ajay Sharma. Oh, my bad. Then next name was Raj Kadam. Then Anil Kumar Gupta, and let us say Raj Patel. So the question is, we are supposed to sort this list based on their surnames. We are supposed to sort this list based on their surnames. So S, K, G, and P. So Gupta should be first, then Kadam, then Patel, and then Sharma. So we are supposed to sort it based on their surnames. So the first thing that we should do is extract the surnames from the list. The first step that we should do is extract the surnames from list and then use only those surnames to sort the data. Use only those surnames to sort the data. So how we can do it? How we can do it? So let us say if I want to extract the surnames. So how can I extract the surnames or last name? So first see this. Let us say last name. So for name in names, last name, how we can do it? If I'm going for, let us say nm dot split on space, and then what I'm doing, I'm simply printing the last names array, or let it be only arr. I'm printing this array. So you observe, in first list there are two elements, Ajay and Sharma. Second element is a surname. In second list, again there are two elements, Raj and Kadam. Second element is a Kadam, surname. In third list, there are three elements, Anil, Kumar, and Gupta. And third element is a surname. Similarly, Raj and Patel, last element is a surname. So the last element in a list is a surname. But index of last element is unknown. It can be 1, or the index can be 2, or it can be 3 or 4 also, depending on who that person is. Let us say we're talking about some South Indian person. We don't know what can be the index of a last name. Or we are talking about some Muslim person who is extending names of his fathers or adding something in front of him. We don't know how many words will be there. So it is a better idea to say last element in a list contains the surname. So last element, second thing, suppose someone is writing surname and he writed Sharma, but someone writed it with small letter and someone has written it capital letter because of typing mistake or something like that. So that we cannot force them that you have to write like this only. They can make some mistakes. So how to solve it? From our end, before using that correct word, we can simply convert that word into lowercase. We can simply convert that word into lowercase. So how we can work on it? So let's do something like this. I'm writing a lambda sorry, I'm writing an anonymous function. Let's say fn is equal to lambda. Name is the input to this function, and what it is doing, name, yes Pallav, we can do it. Length of list -1, we can always get the surname. Name dot split. Name is the input, split that thing using a space, and once it is splitted, we can always go for a last element and we can specify -1. -1 means last element present in the list. So it will be Sharma or Kadam or Gupta or Patel. It can be anything depending on. So it will go for last element, and we are supposed to convert that into lowercase so that there is no issue that whether it is uppercase or lowercase. So sorting will not be any issue. And now we can create a last names array using our map function where we are passing fn is our function and names is our list. So it will take first name, pass it to fn function, which will split it, will take the last word in the list and convert it into lowercase, then second element from the list, third, fourth, and so on. So simply print this last underscore names list. Oh, sorry. I need to convert it to list also. I forgot it. So list. So these are surnames and everything is in lowercase. So sorting will not be an issue. And then write our function for sorting. So how can we sort it? Let us say we are calling a function sorted by passing names. So names is our list. So what it is saying, sort this list means sort the elements present in this list. But how it is supposed to sort? How it is supposed to sort? They are supposed to use key is equal to some function. So okay, let me first delete this part, run this thing. Class, any doubt till this point? If there is no doubt, please post no on a group so that I can proceed forward. Done? Okay, good, 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 good. Thank you. So now what we can do is we can call a function, let us say sorted function. It's an inbuilt function. So what we are supposed to sort? Rearrange. Sorting means what? Rearrange. Okay, Yadnet is saying, can you explain name split part again? Okay. Shubham, again you are asking for same thing, name split only? I guess so. Yes, Yadnet, I'll explain. Name dot split. Name dot split means what? Split is a function. Let us say my string, or let us say name is my variable which contains the value, let us say Ajay Kumar Gupta. So when I say ARR is equal to name dot split, split on space, what it will do? It will split this string Ajay Kumar Gupta into multiple parts based on space. Means what? First part, first element in the ARR will be Ajay, because after that there is a space. Second space comes after Kumar. So second element will be Kumar. And remaining part Gupta will be a third part of our array. So if I'm printing ARR. So third part is a Ajay because we are split it on a space. Rachel left the group. Nice. Second element is a Kumar and the third element is a Gupta, means it is simply splitting the groups based on space characters. So now we are calling a sorted function. Sorting means what? Rearranging the values. So what we are supposed to do? We are supposed to rearrange the elements of names list. But how? For that, use key is equal to fn. Means what? Use the values written by fn function. Use the values written by fn function. So what fn function is returning? Check here. What fn function is returning? It is returning the surnames only. Am I right? This fn function, when we are using it with map, it is returning what? It is returning only surnames. That too in lowercase. So basically, this sorted function will rearrange the elements of names using surnames. Using what? Surnames. So we can return it in, let's say, sorted underscore names, and then print sorted underscore names. So Gupta is first, Kadam is second, Patel is third, and Sharma is fourth. Any doubt? So this key means what? Use the, based on what you are supposed to return, or based on what you are supposed to sort. Sort it based on the values written by fn function. And what this is returning? It is returning the surnames in lowercase letters. Please do not ask me why there is an error if you have name dot split. I'm simply copy pasting this code in a chat box, very chat. I can copy paste the entire code in WhatsApp group, and you please copy from here, so there will not be any kind of error. Is it okay? Typing mistakes, sorry, we cannot solve, but yes, I can copy paste the code from where you can take it. Okay, thank you, Lekha. Any other doubt? If no, we can proceed with our today's session. Okay, thank you. So we'll start with some remaining few points of a dictionary, and then we'll move to list comprehension, dictionary comprehension, generator functions, and so on. So we had a dictionary of students containing some student information, something like that. Student is equal to opening closing bracket. The first element is name. The name is Ajay. Second element is age. Let us say age is 20. And third element is city in which the student is living. Let us say Mumbai. And print student. Yes. Suppose yes, in previous session we saw, if we want to remove a particular element from a dictionary, can we remove it? Yes, there are multiple ways. One of the ways is student dot remove, let us say age, no, so it was pop. So there is a pop method where you can pass the attribute name, and that field will be deleted. Now there is only age and city. But what if you want to delete all the elements? What if you want to delete all the elements from your dictionary? Then it is simply a method called student dot clear. And after calling this method, we are printing the dictionary. And you can observe the dictionary is empty. So basically clear method is used to delete all the elements from the dictionary. And then how you can copy the content from one dictionary to another dictionary. So so this is a student dictionary, and let us say I'm creating a copy. CPY is equal to student dot copy. So I have created a copy of a CPY dictionary, and then what we are doing, we are adding a field to this, a copy of a student dictionary, and let's say roll number is 121. Now let us print the original student dictionary, and then we are printing the CPY copy. But as you can observe, copy is not as original dictionary. We have created a copy in a CPY object, and then we have added a roll number field to it. And now if we'll check, this roll number field is in only copy, but it is not available in a original student dictionary. Means what? When you create a copy of a student dictionary, you are creating a separate object with a separate storage space. So now student is a different object, CPY is a different object, and both the objects are having their own storage space. They are not conflicting with each other. Means what? Change in a student will not hamper change in a CPY or copy, or change in a copy will not hamper the change in a student. Something like that. Let us do something like this. Student of name is equal to Umesh. So change in student is reflected only in student object. It is not reflected in copy. So this is one way of creating a copy of an object. And there is another way, and that is using equal to symbol or equal to operator. So we are writing CPY is a student. So now value of student is copied in CPY dictionary. And after that we have added a field roll number in a copy object and run. Now if you observe, we have added roll number field only in CPY object, but this roll number field is also added in student object. Why so? Because here both CPY and student, these are object names pointing to same object. Here separate copy of object is not created. Two different objects are pointing to, sorry, two different names are pointing to same object. So if you perform some changes in student of using student name, it will be reflected in copy. If you'll perform some change in copy name, it will be reflected in student object, because two different names are pointing to same object. So this is called as a shallow copy, and this copy method, this is called as a deep copy, because two different objects are separate. They are not interfering with each other. So depending on your requirement, either you can use equal to operator or you can use copy method. Any doubt, class, in this topic? No? Okay, good. Then we'll move to next topic, that is using dictionary for counting. Yes, Pala? Any doubt? Okay. Yes, Pala, I can give example. Before that, let me copy paste this code in our WhatsApp group. So those who wants to do some experimentation, they can do. Yes. And there will not be any kind of syntax mistake. When to use second method? Copying. Let us say, Palav, there are two students. Why we will copy the object? Okay. Let us say there are two students. Student one, and let us say Ajay and Ramesh. What you are supposed to do is, initially you have only information about Ajay, like what is his roll number, what are his marks, then CPA kitna hai, how many courses he has undergone and all. Now what you want same information for Ganesh. So what you will do, you will create an object, you will create a copy of a Ajay, and now you will create a copy using copy method. Why? Because if you are changing the information of Ganesh, that you are changing his marks or which course he has enrolled, that thing should not be reflected in Ajay. So you will use copy method explicitly. There is no thing you are supposed to use it. But let us say there is one course, or let us say there is one event that is coordinated by Ajay and Ganesh together. So suppose a, a new student wants to enroll in a course, and Ajay wants to change it. So when Ajay changes it, the change should be reflected to Ganesh. And if Ganesh is allowing some student to enroll and Ganesh is enrolling the student, that change should be reflected to Ajay also. So means what? Two different persons or two different entities are performing operation on one object, and that change should be reflected to both the parties. What you will do? You will use same object, but with two different names, one for Ajay, one for Ganesh. Similarly, when you are creating the queue, or say when there is a queue, so someone is inserting in a queue and someone is removing an element from a queue. So will you use two different objects or one object? One object. So one is inserting at the beginning of a queue, another is removing from the queue. So we can use list as a queue. So one person is inserting at the beginning of a queue, or he is inserting element at the index 0, and someone is removing the element from index -1. So you will give two different names, but same queue object, or let us say same list object. Any doubt, Pallav? I hope I answered your query. So this copy is mostly used in system programming, like when you are dealing with kernel of a OS, you are developing drivers and kind of things. It's a simple thing, no? You can send a data to printer from different number of applications, but the printer queue is same, na? Means everywhere they are referring to same queue. Okay. By the time Pallav is typing his out, I'll write some other part of code. Let us say, okay, what Pallav is saying, I understood the copy function, but the problem is why we using two name with same object. Okay, two names are used with same object so that two different people can work on it at the same time, or two different methods can work on it at the same time. Because in that case, there will be two different meaningful names. For example, Ajay and Ganesh are two different meaningful names. They are not same names. So who added it? Ajay. Who added it? Ganesh. But they added it on a same object. And in our programming, the most important thing is using meaningful names to to the object, so that there will not be any kind of ambiguity. And Pallav, still, if you have some doubt, please call me after a session. We can have a brief discussion about it. And if anyone else is having the same doubt, then we can discuss it on this platform. Is it okay? Okay, sure. Ajay, please do call me. So let us say we have a emotions list. So our first emotion is I am very happy. Then comma. Second emotion is this is worse than worse. Some terminology used by student. I don't understand this thing very well. So he is on seventh cloud. Most then this is not good, and this will be very good. So this will be very, very good. So what is our task? We are supposed to count occurrence of every word using dictionary. And dictionary is the best thing to do this, or instead of using any other data structure. If you want to use a data structure for counting the words, let us say we have a dictionary. So initially our dictionary is empty. So what we are supposed to do is we will create a key value pair. Word will be used as a key in a dictionary, and value will be how many times that word has occurred in a dictionary. So initially our dictionary is empty. Then what we are supposed to do is we start counting the words in a dictionary. So definitely how we are going to proceed for it. First we will go sentence by sentence. For sentence in emotions, so we'll go sentence by sentence, and then we are supposed to split every sentence into word, because we are supposed to count the words. So our next thing is split the sentence into words. So words is equal to, second thing is words is equal to sentence dot split, and then process word by word for words in words. Now what we're supposed to do, we're supposed to check whether a particular word is there in a dictionary or not. If word is in a dictionary, then we are supposed to increase the count by 1. If it is not in a dictionary, then add that word to the dictionary and specify occurrence count as a word. For example, here, something like this: if a word is in, I hope I'm not doing any kind of spelling mistake. Yes, we are checking if a word is in a dictionary or not. If word is in a dictionary, things is simple. Dictionary of word, it will give us a value. We are supposed to increment this value by 1. But if word is not in a dictionary, then add this word to the dictionary and assign count as 1. So if word is in a dictionary, increase the count by 1 plus equal to 1. Otherwise, simply add the word to the dictionary. And our final step, print the dictionary. Yes. So now I word appeared once, M word appeared once, very appeared 3 times, and so on. But this is not a good way to print the dictionary. We can print it in much better ways. So we can use for loop. Let's say for key comma value, or we can make it something like this: for word comma count in dictionary dot items. So item returns the key value pair, as we have discussed in previous session. And here we can simply print now word comma count. Oh, we can make it, we can format it also. That will be a better idea. So here colon 8 means I want it to occupy 8 spaces, even though it is less. And then we want to go for left align, and it will occupy 10 spaces. Dot format. So first thing is word, second thing is value. So I appeared once, this word appeared 4 times, is appeared 4 times, then good appeared 3 times. So let us, okay, this is not good. I'm increasing the count of good by 2, 1 more, and let us check is it reflected or not. The good appeared 5 times. So this is how you can use dictionary to calculate the thank you, Siddharth. Spelling mistakes. Words and seventh. Thank you. Seventh appeared once and words appeared twice and so on. So any doubt in this example? Yes, Shreya. How does for word comma count works? Okay. So this was Shreya. Then okay. This is correct. And okay. So Karak is asking that how this comma word comma count works. So basically, this is something we discussed in previous session, that dictionary dot items, how what it returns. If I'm writing something like this, dictionary dot items. So if you'll observe, dictionary dot items returns something like this: I comma 1 as one tuple, m comma 1 as second tuple, very comma 3 as third tuple, happy comma 1 as fourth tuple, and so on. How many values are there in every tuple? 2 values: word count, word count, word count, and so on. So these are many values. So what we are doing it? We are using a for loop. So mi will be received in word, 1 will be received in count. This will be received in word, 4 will be received in count, and so on. Then this thing, who is that? Who was asking for less than symbol? Atharva. Okay, Atharva deleted the message. This is for left alignment. Sir, if we want to output this word, output only this word. See, you can check the this word also. Nothing else. You can use filters and all. You can simply check कि this word कहाँ पर है, and accordingly you can print also. You can simply use for loop or while or something like that. Atharva, yes. Before converting this thing to dictionary, yes, you can do it. Something like this. We can write something like this: word is equal to word dot lower, and we can run this thing. We can do this thing. So this will help us that something, suppose here this is capital, and somewhere I'm writing something like this with small t, then both will be considered as a same word. So you can use lower, you can convert this thing into lowercase also. What Adi is saying? Sir, I have net issues and I got disconnected from the meeting due to issues. Okay, Adi. Any other doubt? For Shreya, you can simply check the occurrence of word. What you want is this word. So suppose I'm printing something like this. Okay, let me print over here. Print dictionary of this. So here we are printing the occurrence count of a single word, this over here. I hope Shreya, I answered your query. Yes, Shreya, are you online? Okay. Any other doubt in this topic? Anyone? If post so within 30 seconds, or I'll assume that there is no doubt and we'll move for next session. Anurag, yes, you have doubt? Sir, can you explain how the counter is working here? Anurag, see, initially our dictionary is empty, means there is no word in the dictionary. Am I right? Initially, the dictionary is empty. So if we are checking a particular word is in a dictionary or not, this in keyword will return false. Why? Dictionary is empty means nothing is there. It will go into else part. In a else part, what we are saying? Dictionary. So we are adding that word to the dictionary with a value as 1. Means what? That word appeared once. Let us say we are talking about this word. So initially, is this word in a dictionary? No. So this if condition is false. This in dictionary false. You will go to this else part and you are saying dictionary of this is equal to 1, means occurrence count is 1. So next time, let us say THIS, this words comes. So is if THIS in dictionary, now the condition is true. So what you will do, dictionary of THIS is equal to earlier value plus 1. Earlier value was 1. So you are adding 1 to it. It will become 2. Again, next time if a THIS word comes, if condition is satisfied, you are incrementing the counter by 1 and so on. So initially dictionary is empty, but you are adding element to the dictionary. You are keeping on adding elements to the dictionary. For your reference, I'm writing something like this. Let us say print let me do something like this. Print dictionary of word, and same thing, print dictionary of word. Oh, let me make it more meaningful. Word, comma, something like this. See, I one, am once, very vagara. But what about this? Verse was first, second, then verse is twice, and so on. Similarly, this second time, this third time, this fourth time, and so on. Yes, Anurag? Any doubt? Okay, Anurag, thank you. So, yes, sir, you can do it. Yes, sir, thank you, sir. So now we are moving to most important topic as far as data science is concerned. Everyone who wants to work in data science must be familiar with this concept and should understand this thing very well. The topics are comprehension and generator, and to be more precise, list comprehension, dictionary comprehension, and generator comprehension. Extremely important topics. So if you have any doubt, please do post it on a WhatsApp group. We won't mind that we are not able to complete entire thing in this session. We can carry forward it in next session also. And don't be afraid that okay, I'll extend session beyond 12:30. We'll stop at 12:30 only. But these are very important topics. So the question arises, why comprehension is important, why lambda function is important. So the obvious question the obvious answer by many students or many people are, it reduces the number of lines of code. But believe me, it is not about reducing the number of lines of code. It is about increasing the speed. It is about increasing the speed. So how it increases the speed? Suppose I am asking you to do what? Do one thing. Write a code to delete all the files in a folder. Write a code to delete all the files in a folder. In a folder, there are 1000 files. So what you will do? You will write a for loop. That for loop will read file name and then delete file name. So how many times your for loop will run? 1000 times. In 1000 times, first it will read the file name, then it will delete the file present in the folder. How much time it will take? It will take some time. Second thing, what you are doing, you press Control A, delete, yes. How much time it will take? It will take some time. But which thing will happen fast? Your code or manual delete? Definitely manual delete. Why? OS is doing it. You are deleting one file at a time, and OS is deleting multiple files at a time. Means what? In OS, there is a inbuilt parallelism, or there is an inbuilt mechanism which can do the things parallelly. So when you are deleting 1000 files one at a time, it is a sequential operation. But OS is deleting 1000 files at a time. That is a parallel mechanism. So which will be executed faster? Definitely parallel mechanism. So when you are using comprehension, list comprehension, when you are going for lambda functions, things are executed internally. And when things are getting executed internally, they are executed in parallel. But when you are using for loop, things are executed in a sequence. And that's why when you go for lambda function, when you go for map function, when you go for comprehension, execution speed is higher. And that's why people say you should go with comprehension. When you are dealing with data science, you are not dealing with one item at a time. You are dealing with hundreds of items at a time. You are dealing with thousands of items at a time. If you are processing those items in a for loop, system is slow like anything. But if you are processing those items in loop parallel, your speed is exceptionally good. That's why comprehensions and lambda functions are very important as for data scientists. So I hope you got the concept why comprehension is important. Any doubt? Class? If you have any query, please post or simply say go ahead on a group. Oh, no query? Good. So we'll start with comprehension, how comprehension works and so on. Okay. Thank you, Ashwini. So first we'll check how comprehension is internally implemented, or it should be implemented. It is implemented. Let us say I have a list of 5 elements, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what I want to do is I want to calculate the square of every number. I want to calculate the square of every number and store it in another list. Let's say LST square. So LST square is initially a blank list. How it works? Let us say for element in LST square. So this for loop will go to every element of list one by one. And then what we are doing, LST underscore square dot append. The initially list is empty. We are appending the elements to the list. That is, we are adding the elements to the list. And what we are adding? We are adding the square of every element to this list. And then what we are doing? We are printing this list square. Ah, big mistake. Sorry. So this is a list. So we are taking every element of a list one by one, taking a square, adding it to another list and so on. So can we reduce this task? Yes. Now here for 5 elements, the loop is executed 5 times. So can we do it in simple statement or in one statement? Yes, we can do it in one statement, something like this. LST list is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and LST underscore, let us say square is equal to, now please listen carefully what I'm writing. Sorry, listen and observe carefully what I'm writing. For LM in LST. So what it will do, it will take first element, then second, then third, then fourth and fifth, and it will pass that element over here. So what we are doing, so this part is called as a expression part or a processing part, and this is called as iterative part or expression, something like that. So this part, this for loop is going through every element one at a time, and it is returning that element over here. And then what we are doing, we are taking a square of an element. We are taking a square of a element. Yes, it's a dynamic programming, but it will be appreciated if you will post it on a group. Because there I am reading directly. So, and then we are we are taking one element from a list. We are taking a square, and that square will be appended in a list. That square is appended in a list. So who is appending in a list? Python is doing internally. Who is iterating through a list? Python is doing it internally. And then now let's print it. lst underscore square. So square of 1 is 1, 2, 4. Let us say add one number to here also, 6. Square of 6 is 30. So what we are doing, we are going through a list one at a time, returning that element. That element is getting converted into square, and that square is appended in a list itself. So here comes another doubt. Here also we are using for loop. In previous example also we are using for loop. Then how this method is faster than previous for loop? How this method is faster than previous for loop? So listen. So when we are using previous method, the code that I am highlighting, it is a sequential code. Your core means what? It is sequential code means what? One element at a time. But when you are going for this thing, this is a vector processing. It will use vectorized instructions available in your CPU. Let me repeat it one more time. When you are going for such things, comprehension, it internally uses vectorized instructions available in your CPU, or vectorized instructions available with your CPU. So what do you mean by vector? Vector means array. So when you say element square, it is taking entire list as an input and taking a square of that list. It is taking entire list as an input and taking square of array element in one time. Then second question, sir, if we have 10,000 elements, can all 10,000 elements are squared at the same time? No. Let us say your CPU can handle a vector of size 100. Let us say your CPU can handle a vector of size 100, and there are 10,000 elements, and there are 1,000 elements. How many batches are there? 100, 100, 100, 10 batches. 100 into 10, 1,000. So your 1,000 elements are squared in 10 batches. So how many CPU cycles are required? 10 CPU cycles are required. But if I am going with a conventional for loop, how many CPU cycles are required? 1,000 CPU cycles are required, because after every CPU cycle, one element is squared. But let us say your CPU has a vector processing ability, and your CPU can process a vector of size 100, and your list has 1,000 elements. What will happen? In first cycle, it will square 100 elements. In second cycle, it will square 100 elements. In third, 100, up to 10 cycles. So in 10 cycles, it will square 100 into 10, that is 1,000 elements. And that is how it internally increases the execution speed. That is how it internally increases the execution speed with the help of vectorized instruction set supported by CPU. And nowadays, every CPU, it doesn't matter how cheap laptop or how cheap your system is, it supports vectorized element, or it supports vectorized instruction set. Even though your laptop is worth 30,000 rupees, it do support vectorized elements. Okay, between lambda map and comprehension, which one is faster? Doubt by Mukesh. Again, it depends on how you are coding it. It is not whether a lambda map is faster or comprehension is faster. It is how you implement it. So if you implement both the things exceptionally good, then comprehension will work faster as far as my understanding is concerned. Yes, Mukesh? I hope I answer your doubt, but it's like, again, how you are coding it. If you are not a good programmer, then you can code anything which is working slower. Sure. But if you are a good programmer, then comprehension will work faster. Okay. Then Shubham has a doubt. Can we write multiple lines in comprehension? Yes, you can write multiple lines in comprehension. We are going for that. That how to process. You can write nested loops in comprehension also. We are going for it shortly. You can write. You can write multiple. You can write nested loops. You can write if-else statements. You can write ternary operator. Everything inside comprehension. So let's go for nested statement itself. Let's say I have a matrix. Let us say I have a. Oh, before that, any doubt in comprehension? No? Okay. Thank you, Tejas. Let us say we have a matrix or list, 2D list like 1, 2, comma 3. This is my first row of a list. Second row is a 4, comma 5, comma 6. And third row is 7th, comma 8, comma 9. So 1, comma t, comma 3 is first row, 4, 5, 6 is my second row, 7, 8, 9 is third row. And my every row is represented by one list. So my matrix is nothing but what? List of list. So what is my task? So my task is I want to convert my matrix into single list. Matrix is a 2D, na? I want to convert it into 1D. That is called as flatter matrix, or let's say flattening of a matrix. That is converting 2D matrix into 1D vector, or let's say one list consisting of elements 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in one row. So can we do it using a nested for loop? Yes, we can do it using nested for loop, something like this. Let us say ARR is equal to, it's a blank list, and then for row in matrix, it will read one row at a time. And then what we are going for is for a particular element in a row. So first we will go with row 1, 2, 3, and then element as 1, 2, 3, and so on. And then what we are writing, ARR dot append. So what we are appending is LM, and let us print this ARR. So this is called as flattening of a matrix. This is called as flattening of a matrix. So can we do it using list comprehension? Yes, we can do it using list comprehension easily. So definitely for that we need a nested loop. So it will be something like this. Let us say ARR 1 is equal to opening closing square bracket, because we want it to be a list. And then what we are writing? We are writing for row in matrix. This is our outer for loop, space for element row. So this is our inner for loop. So for row in a matrix, this is our outer for loop. For element in a row, this is our inner for loop. So what is the return value? This element is a return value. The innermost for loop will return something. The innermost for loop will return something, or the innermost control will return something. So what it is returning is lm. What it is returning is a lm, and that will be a part of our list. And let us print this thing, ARR1. This is our flat list. So now there are two loops, outer for loop and inner for loop. And this elem present in inner for loop is written over here. Any doubt? Anyone? Suppose here I'm writing something like this. If elem mod 2 double equal to 0. What I'm writing? If elem mod 2 double equal to 0 means I'm checking whether the element is even or not. Now check. What is written? It will return only those elements which are satisfying the criteria. It is returning only those elements which are satisfying the criteria. So outer for loop, inner for loop, and inside the for loop we have one more control statement. And it is returning only those elements which are satisfying the criteria. So we have written all three statements in a single line. So Shubham, I hope I have answered your doubt. Yes, we can write multiple statements. Angelica has some. Angelica, for you, I'm copy pasting the thing. Please use this thing. Okay, done. Mukesh, yes, we can go for else part also. We'll be covering it shortly. Don't worry. Just give some time or few minutes. Class, any doubt in this thing? Processing the matrix using comprehension. Any doubt in this thing? Class, anyone? No doubts? Okay. Thank you. The class is really nice. They are understanding the concept in really short time. It took me almost 2 hours to understand this thing when I was studying Python, not now. When I was studying Python 2 years ago, just to understand how to process it using matrix. So you are a better student than me. Yes. So let's move to next topic that if we want to calculate the, sorry, let's move to next topic that is transpose of a matrix. So this is a assignment for you. You have 5 minutes or it's a 3 minutes. So what is my question? This is a matrix. So what is your task? Your task is calculate the inverse, sorry, transpose of a matrix using list comprehension. You are supposed to calculate the transpose of a matrix using list comprehension. So basically what you are supposed to do, convert the row into column, or you can convert the column into row. And don't forget that every row is a list. Every row is a list over here. This is one list, this is second list, and this is third list. So every row is a list over here. So would you like to give a try? Class, are you giving a try? Yes, Kevin, good. Yes, Aaron, any doubt? Okay, Aaron, you are answering to Angelica. It's nice that you are helping your fellow classmates. Um, yes, anyone would like to share the code in a group? So class, anyone with a solution or at least tried? Would you like to post the code? No one? Okay, good. So we'll go for array. Let us say ARR 2. I hope everyone is listening and they are attentive. Okay, it's ARR 2. So what the way I'm going is converting the columns into rows. That is the most appropriate way because we are using a list, no? So every column should be converted into row, and row is represented using a list. So I'm going for a loop for, let us say, j in range 3. So here I'm going for range as 3 because there are 3 columns. Because there are 3 columns, and here I'm going for a list. Means what? I'm going for column, and for every column I'm creating a list. So my first column is 147. So I will create a list of containing values 147. Then I'll create a second list having value 258. Then I'll create a third list having value 3, 6, and 9. Something like this. I'll create a first list having value 1, 4, and 7. That will be my first row. Then I'll create second list having value 2, 5, and 7. That will be my second row. Then I'll create a list having value 3, 6, and 9. That will be my third row. So how can I do it? Here I'm going for row in matrix. So when you write for row in matrix, means what? It is representing row 1, then row 2, then row 3. When you will write for row in matrix, it will represent row 1, row 2, and row 3. And from that row, what we are expecting is row of J. What we are expecting is row of a J. Means what? This loop will run 3 times. This for j in range 3, it will run 3 times. J is equal to 0, j is equal to 1, j is equal to 2. That's why this part will be executed 3 times. So this part will be executed as many times that this row loop is executed. So first time when it is executed, it will go something like this. For row in matrix, it will take first row. From first row, it will take 0th column. Then first from second row, it will take 0th column. From third row, it will take 0th column. Then next time from first row, it will take first column. From second row, it will take second column. From third row, it will take third column. Oh, sorry, what I'm saying. Extremely sorry. There is a solution from Vikas. Uh, Vikas, nice one. So there is a solution from Vikas side. Vikas, your solution is also right. So Vikas, if you can post your code on a WhatsApp group, I can share same code with students also. Both your solution is also right. Nice one. Yes. So from first row, you are sorry. When this, where are we? Sorry, class. I simply got distracted. So for, let us say, row in ARR, print row. ARR2. For row in ARR2. So this is our first row, second row, and third row from ARR2. So first row is containing element 1, 4, and 7. So in first row, what we want is 1, 4, and 7. So what we did, when your for loop, or this for loop is executed first, value of j is 0. And value of j is 0. So what we are doing, for row in matrix, it will take first row. From this row, it is extracting the element row of 0, that it will extract 1. Then from second row, it will extract the element at location 0, that is 4. Then from third row, it will extract the element at location 0, that is 7, which will create our first list. When this loop is executed second time, value of j will be 1. So it will extract the element at row of 1, that is 2, then row of 1, that is 5, and then row of 1, that is 8, which will form our second list. Then when value of j will become 2, it is like row of 2, that is 3, then row of 2, that is 6, and then row of 2, that is 9. So that is how it will work. So that's how we can take a transpose of a matrix. Class, I hope you understand it. If yes, please say yes. Otherwise, if you have any doubt, please post your doubt. And the solution of Vikas is something like this. What it is saying, for j in range 3 is going for matrix of ji. So simply change the row and column. What happened? I is not defined, or sorry. So this is even a simpler solution. So this is executed first, then this is executed second, and you are simply changing the row and column indexes. So I guess a solution of Vikas is much better than my solution. Good, Vikas? No, Vikas, thank you. No need to send it one more time. It's nice solution, Vikas. Good. Now let's move to another part. The student was asking, sir, how can we add if else part again? Yes, sorry, we can use if else in a list comprehension. Let us say I have a list of numbers. One second number is ABC, third is true, then 12.5, 10, and 16. So what is my task? So my task is take a square of every number in a list. Take a square of every number in a list. But can I take a square of every number in a list? No, I cannot take a square of ABC. I cannot take a square of ABC. Similarly, the question is very specific. Take a square of only integers. Take a square of only integer numbers. So can I do it? Yes, I can do it. How can we do it? Using list comprehension, let us say LST underscore SQ is equal to for element LST if, I hope you remember this function is instance to which I am passing element and integer. So what is I'm asking is this elem is an instance of integer, means what is it is an integer? If it is integer, it will return true. Otherwise it will return false. So outer for loop is executed for element LST, then inner control statement is executed, and as we discussed, only those elements are returned which satisfy the criteria. So here we will get only those elements who are integers, and we are taking square of these numbers and then we are printing the elements. LST square. So 1 is an integer, one square of 1 is 1. ABC is not integer, it will not be squared. True, as discussed in one of previous sessions, to us it appeared as a boolean value, but internally Python treats true as 1 and false as 0. That's why when you check for is instance of integer, it returns true. It returns true. That is according to it, this value is a integer. It returns and square of this is 1 only. 12.5 is not integer. 10 is an integer. Square of 10 is 100. 16 is an integer. Square of 16 is a 126. Yes, any doubt in this example class? See, age digits and all, they are used when you are dealing with strings. If you are input Ashwini is asking, sir, can we use age digit? Age digit is a particularly method specific for strings. So if you have a string input and you want to check whether it is a number or not, yes, you can use age digit. But here it can be of any type. So in that case, age instance is a more appropriate method. So Shubha Chauhan is saying that I should have written in float over here. No, I'm very precise because my problem is take square of only integers. It is not mentioned that I should take square of floating point numbers. It is only for integers. Problem statement was very clear. Sure, Shubham? Sir, I guess Shubham is saying, Ashwini, there is some error because input and output matrix are same. Yes, there might be some mistake. Let me check it. Yes, thank you, Ashwini. I corrected my error, and I guess no one else like observed it. But thanks, Ashwini, for yes. It's fine now. Thank you, Ashwini. Thank you, Shubham. Okay, Monica has a doubt. She's saying ls square. Sir, in this statement, can you explain the sequence of execution? Yes, Monica. Yeah, what it is doing? First, it will go in a for loop. In for loop, it will take one element of a list at a time, and this element lm will be passed to if control. And now our if will check, is this element, let us say 1 or abc or true, is it an instance of integer? If it is instance of integer, this if will return true. If it is not instance of integer, it will return false. And only those elements which satisfy this criteria, like 1, true, 10 and 16, are returned over here, are written over here. Those elements which does not satisfy the criteria are not returned over here. So only 1, true, 10 and 16 will appear over here, and then it will calculate square of those numbers and will be stored as a part of a list. Monica, have I solved your doubt? Okay, thank you, Monica. Let us move to if else part. Someone is asking for can we use if else in a list comprehension? Yes, we can use if else in a list comprehension. Let us say my list is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. My mistake. And now what I want to do, I want to identify whether every element of a list is a even number or a odd number. So definitely it will deal with if else now, if number is even or odd. So how can we do it? Let us say lst underscore type is my list in which it will contain even and odd, whether it is an odd number or even number. So here what I am doing, for element in list. So this for loop will go through element one by one. It will return the element, and here I am using if statement, if lm mod 2 double equal to 0, and checking whether the element is divisible by 2 or not. If it is divisible by 2 or not, else. So if it is divisible by true, it will return even. But if it is not divisible by true, in else part, it will return odd. So just a reminder, this is a ternary operator in Python. This is how you use ternary operator in a Python. If this condition is true, it will return even. Otherwise, it will return odd. If a condition is true, it will return even. Otherwise, it will return odd. Let us print this thing, lst underscore type. So 1 is odd, 2 is even, 3 is odd, 4 is even, and so on. So this is a ternary operator. So if anyone wants to use if else, then they are supposed to use in this manner in the form of ternary operator in a list comprehension. Class, any doubt? Harsh, if you have any doubt, please post it on a group instead of raising your hand, or do you want to comment something orally? Yes, someone has commented something. Yes, you can use nested if else and you can go to any depth according to your wish. There is no problem. There is no problem. You can go to you can go for nested if else, you can go for that is also okay. But again, as I told you, if you want to go for if else, please you are supposed to use ternary operator like this. So you can use nested ternary operator also. And I guess we have discussed that. So does order of ternary operator matters? Yes, order matters. See, precedence is also obviously will taken into consideration, Prathamesh. Yes, Prathamesh, yes, order of ternary operator matters. Monica, sir, can you please give general syntax for list comprehension? The general syntax for list comprehension is something like this. Let us say LST is my list. And if I want another list, or say modified, then it is something like this. For LM in LST. And this blank part is something where you are supposed to write your code. So this is a general syntax for list comprehension. You have a list and then you create a modified list using this way. Monica, I hope I have solved your doubt. Yes. Now we go for a last example of a list comprehension. Can we use list comprehension to create summaries and all? Yes, we can use list comprehension to create the summaries. For example, I have a list 1, 2, 3, 4, -1, -2, -3. And what is my target? My target is I want to calculate how many positive numbers are there. How many positive numbers are there? I want to count positive numbers. So can I count it using list comprehension? Yes, I can count it using list comprehension. So first I'll use a for loop for element in a list, and then we are checking if this element is greater than 0 or not. If a number is greater than 0, it is considered a positive number, and we are returning that number in a list. So now this resultant list will consist of only those numbers which are positive, and then we will use len function, which we are already familiar with, and then we will print the cnt. So there are 1, 2, 3, and 4. There are 4 positive numbers that we are printing. If we want to count the number of negative numbers, we'll simply go for less than simple and run it. So now there are 3 negative numbers in our list. So this is how you can use the list comprehension for creating the summaries also, that you can count based on some criteria. Any doubt, class? Okay. So now we'll go for our next point, that is generator. This is our last example of a class today's session. What is generator and how generator works? So generator is a function. Generator is nothing but a function, but this is a special type of function which use yield keyword, which yields what? Yield keywords instead of return keyword, which yields yield keyword instead of return keyword. For example, let us say I want to generate some random number. So random is a library, and I'm writing a function def random underscore number. Inside this function, I'm writing a infinite loop while true. So this is an infinite loop, and I'm going for yield random dot random integer, generate a random integer between 0 and 10. So class, observe it very carefully. This is an infinite loop. Means what? It will keep on running. So is it going to halt any moment of time? No, it will keep on running. Okay. Sorry. Let me go with a very simple example first. We'll take this example in next session. It is a bit complicated. Let us say I have a function fan colon which says yield 1, then second yield 2, and then yield 3. So as I discussed, yield is something similar to return, but it is a bit different. So in one function, how many return statements you can write? N number of return statements you can write. But how many are executed? Only one. The moment your return statement is executed, code returns. The control is transferred from your function. Here, how many yields are there? There are 3 yields. There are total 3 yields. Then I'm saying, let us say x is equal to fun. Then I'm saying y is equal to next. Next of what? X. And I'm printing y. So what is the output? 1. Why? Because this our first yield is 1. Let me repeat this thing 3 times. For I in range 3. And now 1, 2, and 3. If I'm running it for 4 times, what will happen? After 3, it will give an error. There is nothing to iterate. So when I'm running this, it is something like this. When you call your when you call next first time on X, you are calling a next on which function? Fun, which is assigned to X. And then when you call next, it will return first yield, or it will execute first yield. When we are calling it second time, it will run second yield. When we are calling it third time, it will return third yield. When we are calling fourth time, there is no fourth yield. There is no fourth yield. So basically, it is like a iterator. It is like a iterator. This fun function is providing us 3 iterators because there are 3 yield functions, 1, 2, and 3. So this is called as generator. Generator means what? A generator is a special function with multiple yield values, and every time you called a next function, it returns one yield. Then it will return second yield, third yield, and so on. So in this function, there are 3 yields. So we can call next 3 times. If there are 4 yields, we can call next 4 times, and so on. Class, is there any doubt in this topic? If yes, please post it. Okay, no doubt. Good. So there are 3 yields. That's why we can call it 3 times. Let us say I am importing a random function. I'm importing a library called random, and inside this def, I'm writing I'm writing a infinite loop while true. And inside this while loop, what I'm doing, let us say I'm generating a random number, let us say y is equal to random dot random int. Oh, it should be random dot random int. So this method will generate a random number between 0 and 10, and then we are yielding this number y. So now if you'll observe this def function, how many yields are there in def function? There are infinite yields. Why? Because our while loop is infinite, so there are infinite number of yields available in this fun function. So I can write, let us say in range 10, and I'm saying next one what number, and instead of y, let's say we are using z. Unexpected indent. Oh, good. Module random. Ah, it should be random. Yes. Sorry for my mistakes. Simple typing mistakes. So we are generating a random number between 0 and 1, and then we are yielding it. And this while loop is an infinite while loop. So how many yields we have? We have infinite number of yields. So we can, in this for loop, we can call n number of, we can call this n number of times. Let's say I'm calling it 1000 number of times. Will it work? Sorry, I'm calling it 1000 number of times. Will it work? Yes, it will work without any problem. So this is called as generator. So basically, Aditi has a doubt. Aditi is asking, so every time we need to mention range, any inbuilt function to count yield. See, it is not necessary that you should mention range anytime. It depends on you. If you want to call it 10 times, if you know how many times you want to call it, 10, 50, 20, something, you can specify the range. Otherwise, there is no need to specify the range. It depends on programming logic. Here, just I wanted to tell you that you can call it infinite number of times because there are infinite, because our while loop is infinite over here. So there are infinite number of yields here. Here it will call it only 10 times. Aditi, I hope I understood and I understood your question correctly. Uh, Thank you, Aditi. So, class, that's it for today. We'll not go into more depth. The next question is a bit tricky. It will, so we will exceed our time. So now the session is open for doubts or question answers. If anyone is having it. So our participants are very prompt. The moment I said that's it for today, people started leaving the classroom. Okay, someone was typing something. Oh. So class, if you have no doubts, then there is one question from my side. Class, do you need any doubt solving session or for assignment session where you can ask anything related to this, or we can talk about practical applications or something like that. So when I say doubt solving session, I'm talking about anything that is covered till this point. About previous recorded sessions are available. There is no doubt about that. The only thing is some students' activities are also recorded, like playing with screenings and all. Okay, but let us see how we can do it. We have recorded sessions with us, with the only exception of first day. For first day, we have only first half is recorded. Second half is not recorded because of some technical problem. Let us see how we can share all these things. Yes, Athava, we can give more practical problems for these concepts. Yes, we can do it. Yes, we can give some exercises and we can give some homeworks. Yes, we can do it. So the important question is, do you want a doubt solving session for previous sessions? Let's till now there are 6 sessions. If you have doubt in any of the session, we can go for the doubt solving session. So is it okay if we'll arrange it on Google Meet instead of Zoom? Is a Google Classroom okay, or that is Google Meet? You simply need to have Google Meet installed on your mobile, and it works fine. Aditi, Zoom is fine, I know, but I just wanted to try with Google Meet also, because it is observed that Google Meet requires less bandwidth and clarity is more on Google Meet. That is something shared by few students. That's why I just asking that their doubts will also be cleared and we'll have a clarity. Some students were saying that okay, Google Meet is better or something like that, or something like that, something like that. Oh, uh, Aditi is asking that then please conduct remaining all sessions in Meet. See, it is something that should be unanimously decided in a session. We'll have a doubt solving session on a Google Meet, and if everyone agrees with it, then we can shift to Meet. That is something that we can do, but everyone should agree. For that, we will have a demo session on Meet where we can solve doubts of all the students. So what Anurag saying, sir, also if you could attach the assignments in classroom rather than everyone posting. Yes, actually, till now we have not officially posted any assignment. The thing that was posted or given to you was for practice session. So there are 2 types of assignments. One is exercise and another assignment is which is for marks, whose marks we will consider. So we have not yet posted any assignment which you are supposed to solve for marks. So yes, we will create a separate assignment by today or tomorrow, which is specifically for marks. Yes, Aditi, we will check if Google Meet is okay with all the students after that doubt solving session. We'll keep our remaining sessions on Google Meet only. So yes, Aditi. Okay, Aditi, welcome. Then someone else is saying something. So Mihir, it's okay, Mihir. You said something and deleted something. Okay, I guess you posted on different wrong group. Um, what does next do? Mihir, by today or tomorrow morning, we'll post a assignment which is for which is for grading your course, but it's okay. And for we'll post some exercises for practice also. Okay. So if there is no doubt, Anurag, yes, at the beginning of next session, we'll start with generator only. Yes, we can do it at the beginning of next session. So, class, we conclude session now. If you have any, what Shubham is saying, sir, when are we going to arrange the doubt solving? Okay, for doubt solving session, we will share the timing and link on this group only. Most probably it will be tomorrow afternoon around 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock something. Most probably it will be around 4 o'clock. We'll post it. So with this, I conclude today's session. Thanks for your response and all. The WhatsApp group is still available for communication.